Something shocking just happened inside Windsor Castle, and royal insiders are calling it one of the most emotional moments the monarchy has seen in decades. According to reports coming from palace staff, Prince William finally reached his breaking point after discovering that an official portrait of Princess Diana had allegedly been hidden away in a dark storage room for nearly 25 years. This wasn't just any painting. Sources claim it was created during one of the most iconic periods of Diana's life, back when the world saw her as the people's princess and millions admired her compassion, beauty, and connection with ordinary people. But instead of hanging proudly inside the royal halls, the portrait was reportedly pushed out of sight for years. That's when William decided enough was enough. Witnesses say he personally walked into the storage area, took the portrait himself, and placed it on the wall beside Queen Elizabeth in the Royal Matriarch section of Windsor Castle. Staff members were stunned, but the real shock came moments later when Camilla reportedly saw the portrait hanging there. Palace insiders claim she completely lost control and immediately confronted King Charles, demanding the painting be removed at once. But what happened next allegedly left everyone speechless because, for the first time in years, Charles did not immediately agree. The tension inside the palace reportedly became intense as old wounds connected to Diana, Camilla, and the royal family suddenly resurfaced again. Many royal watchers believe this moment was far bigger than just a portrait. To them, it symbolized William finally defending his mother's place in royal history, after years of silence and controversy surrounding Diana's legacy. And now people everywhere are asking the same question: was this simply an emotional tribute to Princess Diana, or the beginning of a much deeper royal conflict happening behind palace walls? At the height of her beauty, warmth, and popularity, Princess Diana stood quietly in front of the portrait that had just been finished, completely overwhelmed by emotion. According to those in the room, she stared at it silently for several moments as tears slowly filled her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. Then, in a gesture nobody expected, Diana gently took the artist's hands into hers and kissed them, deeply moved by how perfectly the painting captured her spirit. That portrait was originally meant to hang inside the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor Castle, alongside the most important women in royal history, a place many believed Diana had rightfully earned. But before it could ever be displayed there, Diana tragically died. Palace rumors later claimed that when Camilla finally had the authority to decide what happened to the portrait, she chose not to honor Diana's memory. Instead, she allegedly removed the painting herself and hid it away in a dark, dusty storage room where nobody would ever see it, turning the portrait into a quiet symbol of the unresolved tensions that still surround Diana's legacy inside the royal family today. Ever see it again? According to palace rumors, when one staff member nervously stepped forward and offered to carry the portrait for her, Camilla allegedly turned around and humiliated them so harshly in front of everyone that the employee immediately backed away and stayed silent. Witnesses claimed Camilla wanted to handle the portrait herself, almost as if the moment carried personal meaning for her. As she walked out of the storage room and slowly pulled the door shut behind her, staff members later whispered that she was smiling, not awkwardly or politely, but with the expression of someone who felt they had finally won something they had waited years to claim. But insiders say the tension between Diana and Camilla had started long before that portrait disappeared. During the 1980s and 1990s, while Princess Diana faced relentless criticism from British tabloids nearly every single day, Camilla was reportedly sitting comfortably at her Wiltshire estate reading those same headlines over morning tea. And according to royal commentators, some people close to the palace believed she quietly enjoyed watching Diana struggle under the crushing pressure of public attacks, media humiliation, and the growing collapse of her marriage to Charles. Material to work with because behind the palace walls, Princess Diana was fighting battles that almost nobody around her seemed willing to understand. Her marriage to Charles had already collapsed emotionally, long before the public fully realized it. Insiders described Charles as distant in private and cold beside her in public appearances, leaving Diana isolated inside one of the most powerful institutions in the world. At the same time, she was secretly battling bulimia, an eating disorder that was destroying her health while she was still expected to smile for cameras, attend royal events, and appear perfectly composed in front of millions. Diana was reportedly losing weight rapidly, struggling with severe depression, and trying to raise William and Harry largely on her own while feeling emotionally abandoned by the palace. Sources close to the situation later claimed she had reached out for help multiple times, hoping someone inside the royal household would understand what she was going through, but instead she was often told to stay strong, remain quiet, and pull herself together. So the pain stayed hidden behind her public smile, growing worse as the pressure around her continued to build. The pressure inside Diana kept building with nowhere to escape, and eventually the pain began showing itself in public moments the cameras could not ignore. Sometimes it was a tremble in her voice during an engagement, tears she could not hold back, or a visible sadness that tabloids immediately turned into headlines. Newspapers branded her emotional, unstable, and too fragile for royal life, while every vulnerable moment became entertainment for people who already believed she did not belong inside the monarchy. According to palace rumors, on mornings when especially cruel stories appeared about Diana's weight, mental health, or emotional breakdowns, Camilla would reportedly sit with friends at her table, read the articles out loud, and laugh along with members of her aristocratic circle. Many of them allegedly viewed Diana as too common and fundamentally out of place among the royal elite. Insiders even claimed Diana was given mocking nicknames behind closed doors, with one of the more gentle ones being the Mouse, a label that reflected how small, nervous, and powerless they believed she had become inside the royal world surrounding her. Others reportedly called Diana Bambi, mocking her as all nerves and no strength, but the cruelest nickname inside those circles was said to be the clothes horse, reducing her to nothing more than a beautiful figure meant to display expensive fashion. According to royal rumors, Camilla never stopped the insults or corrected anyone when those names were used around her. At the same time, Diana faced constant criticism over something as simple as her height. Standing around 5 feet 10 inches, and often wearing heels at public events, she frequently appeared taller than Charles in photographs. So before cameras flashed, Diana allegedly developed a habit of slightly bending her knees, or lowering one hip, physically making herself look smaller beside him to avoid criticism and protect his image. But even that was not enough for the British tabloids. Columnists mocked what they called her royal stoop, with some cruelly describing her as a woman uncomfortable in her own body, like someone who never fully knew how to carry herself inside the rigid world of royalty. Worked. While Diana constantly adjusted herself to avoid criticism, Camilla reportedly stood comfortably beside Charles without changing a thing, and according to palace gossip, she quietly found Diana's insecurity amusing. One story that has circulated for years, though never officially confirmed or denied, describes a formal royal dinner where someone allegedly used the nickname, clothes horse, loud enough for Diana to hear it herself. Witnesses claimed the entire room suddenly fell silent, waiting to see how she would react. But Diana simply smiled, kept her composure, and continued moving through the room as though nothing had happened, hiding the humiliation the way she had learned to do after years under public scrutiny. However, a member of her private staff later reportedly shared what happened once Diana returned to her rooms that night. According to the account, she walked inside, sat quietly on the edge of her bed, and remained completely still for a long time, as if finally exhausted from carrying the weight of constant judgment and cruelty behind her carefully controlled public image. A staff member who witnessed Diana that night later said the silence was more painful to watch than tears would have been because tears would have meant she was letting the pain out. Instead, Diana sat completely still, quietly forcing the humiliation deep inside herself the same way she had done for years. But after her tragic death in Paris in August 1997, the story surrounding Diana reportedly became even darker. According to royal insiders, within hours of confirmation that the princess had died, phones inside the palace were already ringing, not about grief or public mourning, but about jewelry. Questions were allegedly being asked about which royal pieces Diana had taken with her to Paris, and which items needed to be returned immediately to the palace. Reports claimed a royal aide was quickly sent to Paris while Diana's body was still lying in the hospital, tasked with going through her belongings and securing certain valuables before difficult questions could begin circulating. To many people who later heard these stories, it painted a cold and unsettling image of how quickly palace priorities appeared to shift in the immediate aftermath of Diana's death. According to palace rumors, one of the very first official actions taken after Princess Diana's death was not centered around mourning, but around securing royal property and reorganizing palace life now that she was gone. As these events unfolded, Camilla was reportedly already moving through the palace halls where Diana's presence had once been everywhere. For years, she had been known as the woman Charles secretly visited during his marriage to Diana, but after Diana's death, insiders claim Camilla began removing traces of her from the royal residence itself. Stories circulated that Diana had always kept fresh flowers in her rooms throughout the palace, bringing warmth and comfort into spaces where she often felt emotionally alone. After Camilla moved in, reports alleged those flowers were ordered removed and destroyed, with staff forced to carry them away and follow the instructions completely. Rumors also claimed that Diana's bedroom, the room where she comforted William and Harry during difficult times and spent countless nights crying in private, was permanently locked after Camilla took control of the space, adding to the growing belief among Diana's supporters that parts of her memory inside the palace were being quietly erased piece by piece. According to palace rumors, Camilla never intended to sleep in Diana's old bedroom herself, but she allegedly made certain nobody else would ever use it again either. Insiders claimed the room was treated almost like a sealed memory, locked away and stripped of the warmth Diana once brought into it. Her belongings were boxed up, photographs quietly removed from palace walls, and the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor, the place where many believed Diana's portrait belonged, reportedly remained empty rather than displaying her image. Supporters of Diana later believed this was because even after her death, her presence inside the royal family still felt powerful enough to threaten old tensions. Meanwhile, William was only 15 years old when he walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London, carrying grief in front of the entire world. By then, Diana had already told him painful truths about her marriage, including the famous line that there were 3 people in it. According to royal insiders, William watched silently as changes were made inside the palace after Diana's death, seeing her photographs disappear and her rooms transformed, while keeping his emotions tightly controlled whenever anyone was watching. But those close to the family later claimed the anger and heartbreak he carried over what happened to his mother never truly disappeared. According to palace rumors, Princess Anne's history with Camilla stretched back decades before Diana's portrait was ever hidden away, and insiders claimed the tension between them had quietly existed inside royal circles for years. On the night everything finally changed, William reportedly sat alone in his private study and made a single phone call to Anne. When she answered, he allegedly said only one sentence: "She comes home tomorrow." Sources claim Anne immediately understood exactly what he meant and replied without hesitation, saying she could not wait to see the reaction because Diana deserved to return to her rightful place. The conversation reportedly ended there, with no further explanation needed between them. Meanwhile, across London that same night, Camilla supposedly went to sleep completely unaware that a decision had already been made behind palace walls. According to insiders, what almost nobody outside a very small circle knew was that William had been quietly planning this moment for a long time, waiting for the right opportunity to restore Diana's portrait and symbolically bring his mother back into the heart of the royal family where he believed she had always belonged. According to palace insiders, William had not acted impulsively at all. Reports claim he spent months privately studying the official rules surrounding portrait placement inside royal residences, reviewing historical records and palace traditions to make sure every detail was legally and formally correct. He allegedly wanted the process handled so carefully that once Diana's portrait was returned to the Hall of Matriarchs, nobody, not Camilla, palace officials, or royal advisors, would be able to remove it again without violating established royal protocol. On the morning the plan was finally carried out, sources say William's team arranged for Camilla to attend a public engagement outside London, specifically to keep her away from the palace until the portrait had already been placed on the wall. According to the rumors, she left that morning completely unaware of what was happening behind closed doors. The Hall of Matriarchs was reportedly sealed off, access restricted to only a handful of carefully selected staff members personally trusted by William and Anne. No official announcement appeared on the royal calendar, no press release was issued, and the entire operation was carried out in near total secrecy as the portrait of Diana was finally prepared to return to the place many believed it had always belonged. Everything reportedly happened in complete silence. As evening fell, Princess Diana's portrait was finally carried back into the Hall of Matriarchs, after spending more than 2 decades hidden away in storage. According to palace rumors, the staff members handling it moved slowly and carefully, almost as if they understood they were carrying something deeply important that had been neglected for far too long. Princess Anne was already waiting inside the hall, insisting on witnessing the moment herself after years of watching Diana's memory slowly disappear from palace walls. Sources claim that when the staff member assigned to unwrap the portrait paused before cutting the first tie, the entire room fell still. Piece by piece, the protective linen and tissue paper were carefully removed until Diana's face finally appeared again exactly as it had been painted during the height of her beauty, grace, and public admiration. One staff member later reportedly said that the moment Diana's portrait came back into the light, the atmosphere inside the room changed completely, as though years of silence, grief, and unfinished history had suddenly returned all at once. Everything reportedly happened in complete silence. As evening fell, Princess Diana's portrait was finally carried back into the Hall of Matriarchs, after spending more than 2 decades hidden away in storage. According to palace rumors, the staff members handling it moved slowly and carefully, almost as if they understood they were carrying something deeply important that had been neglected for far too long. Princess Anne was already waiting inside the hall, insisting on witnessing the moment herself after years of watching Diana's memory slowly disappear from palace walls. Sources claim that when the staff member assigned to unwrap the portrait paused before cutting the first tie, the entire room fell still. Piece by piece, the protective linen and tissue paper were carefully removed until Diana's face finally appeared again exactly as it had been painted during the height of her beauty, grace, and public admiration. One staff member later reportedly said that the moment Diana's portrait came back into the light, the atmosphere inside the room changed completely, as though years of silence, grief, and unfinished history had suddenly returned all at once. According to those present, the atmosphere inside the gallery changed the instant Diana's portrait was revealed. Nobody spoke, yet the room suddenly felt heavier with emotion as Princess Anne slowly stepped forward from where she had been silently watching the entire process unfold. She stood in front of Diana's portrait for a long moment without saying a word, studying the face of the woman whose memory had lingered inside the royal family for decades. Then, very gently, Anne reached out and adjusted the frame ever so slightly, like someone finally correcting something that had been wrong for far too many years. Within less than 2 hours of the portrait entering the Hall of Matriarchs, Diana's image was finally hanging on the wall beside Queen Elizabeth herself, 2 of the most important women in modern royal history standing side by side at last. One had ruled for 70 years, while the other never had the chance to become queen at all. Witnesses later said everyone in the room simply stood there staring at the portrait in silence before Princess Anne finally spoke softly under her breath, as though she was speaking more to the past than to anyone standing around her. A staff member standing nearby later revealed that Princess Anne quietly looked at Diana's portrait and softly said, "Diana belongs here. She always did." According to palace insiders, that moment carried far deeper meaning than most people realized because Anne's support for William was not only about Diana, it was personal. Long before Diana ever entered the royal family, Anne reportedly had her own painful history connected to Camilla that stretched back decades. Before Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles, he had allegedly been in a serious relationship with Princess Anne, and rumors at the time claimed marriage between them had even been discussed. However, royal restrictions and family expectations reportedly prevented the relationship from moving forward, leaving Anne with little choice but to step aside. Soon afterward, Camilla entered the picture, and in 1973, Anne reportedly sat quietly in the church watching Andrew Parker Bowles marry Camilla in front of her. According to those familiar with royal history, many believed and never completely forgot the complicated emotions surrounding the chapter of her life, which is why standing beside Diana's restored portrait decades later may have meant far more to her than anyone outside the palace fully understood. Princess Anne was known for her discipline and emotional control, and according to royal observers, she carried her own private disappointments long before Diana ever entered the royal family. In royal life, emotions are rarely expressed openly, they are contained and carried quietly behind duty, tradition, and public expectation. Anne's strength was often described as her ability to remain composed no matter what she felt privately. So when she later stood inside the Hall of Matriarchs beside Diana's portrait, witnesses say the moment was not about conflict or rivalry being rewritten, but about recognition. A recognition of a woman whose place in royal history could no longer be ignored or erased. Because in the end, Diana's story was never only about relationships or palace tension. It was about pressure, isolation, and a life lived under constant public scrutiny. And inside that silence, something long unresolved finally felt acknowledged.